Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. We've got a special episode on this one. It's basically a little wrap up of the NZ series and a bunch of questions that you guys had, and mainly about what it takes to ship your car overseas and use it for traveling. So I'm gonna break it down to a few little sections. So the first thing, we're just gonna go a bit of an overview of each episode and the bits that I love from each one, and just basically it was probably the best series I reckon we've ever done on YouTube. You guys seem to love it as well, so thanks for that. So we'll run through all that and then we'll talk about the cost involved with shipping and what you need to organize. There's a bunch of hidden things that you may not know about, and then what to do to get your car prepared for going overseas, and then some general living stuff over in NZ when it comes to just pricing, exchange rate, different things that you may not be aware of. And this is an interesting one. I'm going to talk about the way the trucks are built over there and the things that we put on the hilux that we may necessarily not have needed, and then the different styles of wheeling from here compared to there. And then I'm going to talk about the stuff that you don't need, and then a final summary of the whole trip and the whole experience and whether I do it again or not. So let's rip straight into it. All right, so let's talk about the episodes real briefly. So we started off, it was a bit of a shit show at the start. We actually didn't get the car for the first episode. So shout out to Daniel from NZ Overland. We actually jumped in his Fortuner and he had a disco, and we went out to beach near Wellington. It's probably one of the only places you can wheel out there. So that was pretty awesome. First taste of NZ. It was cold, it was windy, there were a bunch of cows and sheep. So that was a good little intro, but we were still on the North Island. Then we finally got the car. In the next episode, we headed down to the South Island, went straight down to Queenstown and met up with the boys. So we had Zach, Brooke and Tom for this one. So we had a bit of a tour guide. We headed out to the Nevis track, and there was a bunch of little offshoots that we did as well. So that was the first taste of like wheeling off-road country. It was very hilly. It kind of reminded me a lot of like the high country. So pretty simple wheeling, and this is what I was trying to do. I was trying to step it up each time. I didn't want to go straight over there and hit the hard tracks, break the car. So there are a few comments online saying, oh, that's not proper wheeling, but we really wanted to start easy, touring, get some stuff under our belt, and then work it up on the next time. So that was the plan. Then the next episode, we did step up a little bit. We headed out to Skipper's Canyon. I really wanted to do this track because of the suspension bridge. So it's actually named as one of the most dangerous roads in the world. I don't know where it is on the list, but it's somewhere there. And there were a lot of sheer cliffs, very cool drive, not hard. You go out there in your Commodore, but it was very scenic, very different. And the suspension bridge at the end was just epic. I really wanted to get a good shot of that. And then we headed out to Macetown. That was a really cool track because there was, I think, 26 water crossings to head out there. So I was like, all right, this is gonna be Cape York vibes. It was definitely wet, definitely different to Cape York, but a lot of the tracks over there are very windy. They chase the river, so that was one of those ones. That's why there were so many crossings. And an interesting thing, and I'd kind of worked it out by this point, a lot of the tracks out there are one way in and one way out. So they're not really there for destinations, which means when you go wheeling there, you're doing it because you want to drive. It's not to get anywhere. A big thing that gets pushed in Australia is we're trying to get to this destination. Over there, it's the experience is the drive. So you do the track and then you pretty much turn around, come back and do the same track on the way back, the same 26 river crossings. So that was a lot of the tracks over there were like that. The first episode, we went into Christchurch. So we'd knocked off Queenstown and we're heading north now. Want to do some West Coast driving, some little harder stuff. But the first one, we caught up with Phil from Profab, and he took us out to a beach spot. I'm like, let's do that. We haven't done beach yet. See what the beaches are like compared to Australia. Completely different, obviously. So it's very shaly stone, it's black. It's not like white sand you get over here. So that was a cool experience and a little bit more hard wheeling. There are a few offshoots and play hills we could start, getting the lockers involved and stuff. So that was really fun for the car. The next episode after that was some hard wheeling. We had to take it next level. I know NZ has a lot to offer, and we didn't build a four-wheel drive to tackle that kind of stuff. It was a touring car, and we know that. So I was like, all right, if it's a track the Hilux can't do, we'll find a car that does. So we caught up with Nathan from Cray, and he's got comp trucks, or there was actually two of them that we got to jump in. They're sort of still chassis cars, not full comp trucks, but more winch truck stuff. And these had big swampers, 38-inch like treps, and drive anything. We tried to get the thing stuck, pretty much couldn't, but they were really gnarly tracks, like crazy PTO winches, and it was just the full next level wheeling that we could find in New Zealand. So, and also pretty close to home. It was only 3 or 4 hour drive. And this is the big thing we found in NZ. A lot of the tracks are very close. You don't need to go far. You don't need massive long range fuel tanks. Then we caught up with Tim and Charlie, and we had an unexpected dumping of snow. So we took advantage of that and we did our first snow trip. That was probably, I'd say it's one of the best episodes I've done, at least in the last 5 years of YouTube. It was a super sick episode. The snow was thick, it had just dumped overnight, and we got to punch through some tracks up the mountain through the trees, and then huge open valleys where you just going through white powder and there's a track somewhere underneath that. So that was pretty awesome. And we had our first experience of the New Zealand hut. So the camping over there, when it's freezing like that, they have huts everywhere, and you basically go in there, pay a little bit of money to an honesty box, and you can light a fire inside and keep warm because it was bloody freezing outside. So we'll get into this a bit later on. You don't need a bunch of crazy stuff, even heated blankets, because everyone just uses these little huts. Then we ended with the finale for our truck. We took the Hilux up to Mount Greenland, which is one of the borderline harder tracks for a touring vehicle. It's something we definitely used the winches, definitely used the lockers. There was panel damage. It was very shrubby, tight. It wrecked the car. Like, we got to buff the thing when we get home. It was proper wheeling. We did get the Hilux to the end, so we're stoked with that. It got to the end, we didn't break anything, and it was probably, apart from the snow, that was just epic. I think Mount Greenland was the funnest episode when it came to hard wheeling. It really got me heart pumping in some of those spots that we went through, so that was really cool. So let's rip into the juicy stuff. We want to talk about costs, what's involved, all this kind of stuff, and was it even worth it? So I'm going to start with the main thing, and that's just shipping your car overseas. So why did I pick New Zealand? People have done the US a lot. Anywhere else, it's far and it does get very expensive. New Zealand, they call it the 8th state of Australia. So it's one of those places that's very close to home, but very different environment. So it was going to be different for us, but it was still going to be something that's kind of relatable for everyone, because I know there are a bunch of guys that have messaged me saying they want to head over. Is it worth it? Do I get a hire car? Do I take my own? And vice versa. A bunch of the guys who are hanging out within New Zealand really want to ship their cars over to Australia so they can experience Cape York and Fraser Island and all that. And a lot of this will apply, the way it's structured, the things you need to organize. So we found 4 or 5 different shipping mobs. Now, I went with a mob called Taurus, and the reason for that, I'll put a screenshot here. They list all the hidden costs and they break it down for you. A lot of the advertised pricing for shipping that I found sounded really good, but then you've got all your import tax and your freight and your storage and all this stuff, and they were transparent with that. So for the one way from Australia to New Zealand was about $3,300, and that's in New Zealand dollars, and that was to get it one way. Now, we haven't shipped the car back yet, but I think coming from New Zealand back to Australia is slightly more, maybe 4.5. And that's because there's just not as much freight heading this way, so it just costs a bit more, whereas there's so much heading from Australia over to New Zealand, they have a lot more ships heading that way. Now, the things that you would need to organise for your car. So we've imported this on a temporary import. So that involves 2 or 3 things. Number 1, the car can only be there for 12 months maximum. You can extend it if you have a reason and you want to do that, but 12 months it needs to be back in Australia. Number 2, it must remain registered in Australia. It must keep your Queensland plates, your Australian plates. Australian rego should be up to date. All your engineering needs to be done in Australia. Then you have to get what's called a carnet de passage. Now that's essentially your passport for your car. I think it's a French thing, but it's a worldwide recognized document. And that basically allows your car to move from country to country. And that was about $1,630. Now, all of this, by the way, me being me, very last minute, this was a lot of quick research by me. So there may be other ways around it, but this is what I've figured out. For a start, we've booked our shipping, then we've got our carnet for our car, which is our passport. Then turns out I need an international driver's license. Now, when you go to other countries, it's pretty simple. You jump in a car, drive it, all good. That is because, as far as I'm aware, it's because it's a hire vehicle. Now, hire cars carry their own insurance that gets covered in the cost, so you can drive it on your country of origin's license. Because I'm in a vehicle that's not from New Zealand, I have to get an international driver's license to drive that car because it's not from there and I don't have the insurances to cover that. So that was about $600 from AAA, which is the International Driver's License Association for Australia. And that were the main cost. Now, the other hidden cost was import tax. Now, what this means is if you ship a car overseas, you pay an import tax the same as you would as if you transferred a car in between 2 people in Australia. When you transfer it from one person to another, you pay a tax on that. Same thing happens overseas. Now, what that means is if you go overseas, ship the car, leave it there and sell it, you got to pay tax on that. So what the tax is, it's actually a bond, and you'll get that back when you move the car from New Zealand back into Australia. And that was about $4,000 for me. And the way they figure that out is the value of the car, and you can't just make up a number. I physically had to pay for a certified New Zealand valuer, which actually valued the Hilux. It was like $30,000 because they take into account all your modifications. You can't just say, oh, it's an old Patrol, it's $5,000. They'll look at photos. They want pictures of engine bay, interior, canopy, all the stuff that you've done to it, and they'll actually put a decent valuation on it. So that pretty much covers everything for shipping the car over. I'm gonna quickly talk about getting the car prepared. So a big thing in New Zealand, especially heading that way, is bugs, insects. As people know, New Zealand doesn't have any snakes or spiders or insects. Like, they're very, very pedantic about bringing over cross-contamination and stuff like that. So you get a very good clean done to your car. You don't want to pay for just a detail. We're talking like a fumigation, like a proper quarantine clean. There's some places that do it, and they'll go into like every nook and cranny, because if there's a little spider web with some eggs, like, you're screwed. And what that means is when you ship your car over, it'll land, won't pass a quarantine check, then you'll have to have it stored for like a week or so. They spray the car every day, you pay holding fees at the dock, and then you're sitting there waiting for your car in an Airbnb and you can't use it. So it's very important to pay the extra money, get your car cleaned properly. The other thing, you can't have any personal items in there, and we're talking pots and pans, all your camping gear, anything that's loose in the car, like winch controllers, all that crap's got to go. So that's another thing. We had to ship a separate box over with all those bits and pieces and Starlink and whatnot that we wanted to take with us. The car's got to be completely empty. We spent, it was a lot of hidden costs. I just went shopping to buy supplies and it ended up coming out to about $3,000. And I'm talking just pots, pans, pillows, blankets, knives, fork, like everything you could think of that you need. A cooker, like you need all of that stuff. And it adds up. So like chairs, table, chairs, like shit like that we didn't have. So that's something you either got to buy when you get there or ship it over separately. And then obviously the last bit of preparation, just making sure it's registered, make sure your engineering's done. What they do over there is just do a quick WAF check, which is like a roadworthy. They won't look at engineering if it's still registered in Australia, but they just look at things like tires, brake lights, indicators, headlights, just your usual stuff as if it was a roadie in Australia. So once you got all those things ticked off, you should be pretty right to receive your car overseas. I'm going to quickly talk about some general living and stuff. The flights over there are pretty cheap, to be honest. So it's about $450 per person per way. So that's why we decided to ship the car over and actually do a few separate trips. It's worthwhile spending a lot of money to ship your car and then just fly backwards and forwards, especially if you're on the East Coast. They're fairly cheap, so you can get a few different trips, and I suggest going like in the summertime and then do some winter if you want to do some snow stuff as well. Fuel, this is an interesting one because we were lucky because we're on diesel. Now, they have a system called RUCs over in New Zealand, and that's essentially diesel vehicles have to pay an extra tax levy for the kilometers that they drive over on the roads there. So the fuel's actually roughly $1.80 per litre. Now, you hear a lot online about New Zealand has crazy fuel prices. And yes, the unleaded is about $2.83 $3 a litre, but the diesel's cheap because you pay that, but then down the track you need to pay your levy, and that's not cheap. I forget what the numbers are, so I'm not going to say it here. We're going to start with the main thing. Now, a big thing that's promoted in Australia is your fancy canopies and your big 12 volts, and that's for good reason because we have the largest continent in the world, big kilometres. I've been on trips where you haven't seen people for 2 weeks. So over there, it's definitely not like that. You do not need a 12 volt system. You don't need a bloody fridge. None of the boys had a fridge, and they never have. They use a little esky or a chili bin, they call it. Throw some ice in there and it'll stay cold because it's freezing there. I had a few mornings, you wake up, you open your fridge and it's warmer in the fridge than outside. So fridges aren't necessary. Because fridges aren't necessary, 12 volt systems aren't necessary, and it's because you're driving every day and you're super close to town. So you don't need to build these big tourers. Most of the cars over there, everything from the chassis down is where the money's spent. You want to spend money on suspension. Everyone's running around on treps over there, like making the car capable. Even a rooftop tent, honestly, wasn't a massive thing because when you do go out into, for example, the snow episode we did, they've got huts everywhere that like, they're into they call it tramping, where they essentially go hiking and stay in these little huts. And when you take your four-wheel drive wheeling, it's the same sort of thing. It's just normal for them to wheel all day, pull up at one of those huts and spend the night there. So things like rooftop tents and awnings and canopies and fridges and stuff, just not required there. So that's what I found was different. And that's what I found the difference between the way that they build their cars. With everyone that we went traveling with, no one has a flashy four-wheel drive. They're all beaten up, and that is because the terrain is so much harsher, it's so much tighter. The shrubs and the bushes there are very aggressive, they're very spiky. After we did a couple of tracks on the Hilux, like, it honestly needs a respray. Like, it is fucked. There's pinstriping down to the bloody primer on that thing. So it's definitely a different way of wheeling. So for the NZ guys coming over to Australia, I'd think about some sort of 12 volt, because you will be heading out to Fraser, the biggest sand island in the world, or up to the Cape, and you will need at least 3-4 days worth of food and supplies to stay cool in our hot weather. So think about a fridge, think about a battery system, think about solar. Solar is massive in Australia too, because we have so much sun here. Last little note on cost of living and general stuff over there is, have a little extra money for the activities over there. NZ is massive for its tourism and adventure stuff. So especially when we're in Queenstown, like the jet boating, go bungee jumping, parasailing, do the luge, definitely tick that stuff off. Don't just go there for the travel, because it's not remote. So you can go do your wheeling, but when you go into town, there's so much to do. Go quad biking, do all that kind of stuff. And I definitely recommend doing it, because it's just out of control. The stuff they do there is nothing like that in Australia. So keep that in the budget. I'm going to quickly go through some questions. I did do a quick story of people that were interested about stuff with shipping or the NZ trip itself. The first one, would you do it again, or is it not worth it? This came from another YouTuber actually, so they have a sus. I would say yes, because the episode's amazing, the content's amazing when it comes to YouTube. You definitely want to experience other places other than Australia. The hard thing is, some people, well, most people will watch things because it relates to them, whether it's a build, whether it's trips that they can go on. So it's not for everyone, but when it comes down to physically just ticking that content off the list, it's ultimate. We want to do more stuff overseas. We've done Indonesia, we want to do America. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it just expands the horizon and it just shows a lot more of what's out there in the world. Shipping the car itself was just a personal thing of mine. Like, you honestly go over there and just hire a car or something, you can get the same experience, but there's no better feeling than jumping in the car that you've built. Like, when I got those keys and I hadn't seen the Hilux for like 2 months, and I'm just driving on a road in bloody Queenstown, like, there's no better feeling. So I think it was worth it. Like I said, if you're gonna ship it there, leave it there for a few months, because you've got a whole year, and do a few trips backwards and forwards at different times of the year to make it worth it. Are you gonna send it up the North Island? I don't think so this time around, just because our 12 months will be up fairly soon before we can get back over there. I will let you guys know that we're heading to the 4 Drive Expo in Christchurch. I think it's on the 7th of September. So any Kiwis out there watching this, please come down to that show. It's one of the biggest 4-wheel drive shows on the South Island. They've had one on the North Island earlier in the year, but we will be there with the Hilux, and we're specifically staying a little bit longer so we can come to that show. So definitely check that out. I'll put a link down below to their website if you want to grab tickets. Would you consider shipping a car anywhere else and considering the cost? Like I said, when I've looked at things like America, you're talking 15-20 grand plus. So you just got to weigh that up. Honestly, I'd go there and build a car instead if you want to go a bit further. Another USA question. We are heading to the USA around October, November, and we're going to be building something there. So that's going to be that one. Does your car have to be roadworthy for shipping interstate? Yeah, so like I said, it needs to remain on Australian registration. So if you've got your engineering cert, you've got your mod plate done in Australia, keep the rego current, and when it goes to New Zealand, they won't be looking at any of that. They're just purely looking at roadworthy stuff. A couple of questions about quarantine processes. So I passed with flying colors. Now, I was a bit lucky because we just built the thing. It had a brand new paint job, brand new canopy, brand new chassis sprayed, everything. So we were lucky it was fairly new. But I got a feeling coming back, we may fail, but I'm not too worried because that's coming home and there's no time crunch on that. If the car needs to sit at the port of Brisbane for a couple of days, that's fine. But I got a feeling they're not as pedantic because we do have all the snakes and spiders here. So they're not worried about New Zealand stuff coming here because there's bugger all over there. It's really trying to keep all the insects out of New Zealand because it's so good there already. How difficult is it to import a car into Brizzy? I think that's coming from a New Zealand guy. So like I said, hit up Taurus. They're really good with their shipping. And I can't really speak on what happens when you need to register your car here from NZ. I'm hoping it's the same way. Just get your carnet, get it registered in New Zealand, and you'll be able to use it here for 12 months. I'm gonna leave it there. There's a ton of questions, but I think we've covered most of it. It was all just about cost, shipping, is it worth it, this and that. So like I said, I think it was worth it for us. There's a whole series, there's a whole playlist of all the episodes. We're going back for one more trip, one more expo, So I hope to see you guys at the Christchurch Expo, and then we'll get the Luxie back in Australia, and I want to head straight to the Cape. We've got to do some more content over here with the Hilux. All right, thanks for watching. That was a long one.